Uh, Hello, everybody. Uh, it's a pleasure to be here. And for beginning, yes, I would like really thank Latvian Investment and Development Agency for this opportunity. I think this is wonderful to be here. And as already mentioned, we have here today Jonathan Olsberg, and I would like to say that it is really a great honor to have you here, Jonathan. And also would like to say that we need to, everybody here in the room, we need to listen to you very carefully, because Jonathan is going around the world, and he is one of the very well respected and very well informed people about film industries around the world, about the global film industry. Like, he travels from one country to another globally and advises governments and municipalities on how to develop the film industries in these challenging times. So it will be very interesting what you will say, and we actually kind of spoke already yesterday on the topics that we could cover today. There are many things, but we have to probably choose from the long list.
Yeah.
But maybe for the start, I will start with the question that we decided yesterday. So in a couple of words, maybe what the hell is going on in the film industry?
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Andris, Leah, everybody, for the opportunity to come back here to beautiful Latvia and Riga. It's a pleasure to meet you all. So what the hell's going on is kind of what you've been asking. Yeah, we're in, looking from, not just here in Latvia, but globally, we're in an unprecedented time of activity, of production activity. I call it the global production deluge, because that's what it feels like. I used to call it the global production tsunami, but then people thought, well, maybe this isn't such a great word to use. So around the world, we're experiencing a massive increase in production of scripted content, feature films, and also, obviously, particularly television drama series, as well as other forms of content. And just looking at the numbers, I was looking at some figures about what Hollywood spends on producing and acquiring scripted content. And when I say Hollywood, I'm obviously talking about the traditional Hollywood studios, who have been around 7,500 years, but also the new kids on the block, the streaming services. And combined, we calculate in our company that they're probably going to spend this year somewhere between $80 and $85 billion on scripted content. And I don't have the figure for what this might have been a few years ago, but we think this is twice the volume of production in dollar terms that existed 5-6 years ago. So obviously, this massive increase, and currently it feels like a sustainable and sustained increase, and perhaps a growing increase in production, is the game changer, and that's what's going on. And it's affecting every country in the world that has a film industry, and I know it's affecting the Baltic states and here in Latvia as well.
Yes, and so there, I think, going maybe a little deeper of how what is our place as a region, and other things, like what it all consists on, how kind of dissecting it, like how what elements must be in place, or what challenges we have to face in the future with this deluge, because we understand that maybe we're not ready, or but we would love to be ready, right. Really. So this is something very important that we all understand, and as producers, and also as a government and municipal financiers what to do in order to be ready and to take full advantage of this, because we all must agree that it's a good news for industry. It's not. It's we cannot shy away from that. So I think like 3 things that that we would like to talk about today is actually the incentives as one of the things that helps to do that. Then the infrastructure and the workforce. So I'm not sure if I said it in the right order, but I think maybe incentives is the starting point.
I think it's worth, when we're looking at the challenges in the Baltic states in this part of the world as to how to meet the opportunity for the deluge provides, it's worth just looking a little deeper into why it's occurred, because I think it's going to be relevant. So, why is it that there's that here in the nearly 2020 we're experiencing this situation? And I think there are a couple of different reasons. One is related to consumers and the consumer interest globally in seeing this content. Another relates to government policy, which I'll talk about, and the other relates to the way in which the industry itself is developing. But let's come back to content for just a moment. And so what's happening globally is with the penetration of technology, particularly internet, around the world, countries that were considered to be developing countries years ago are moving towards being developed. And consumers in those countries are getting access through technology, through the internet, through broadband, to a huge variety of content that just wasn't available to them before. So I know for many years we've been talking about content is king. I don't think so. I think the consumer is queen, actually. It's the consumer demand that's driving this. So that's one factor to bear in mind. And I think it's relevant when it comes to the Baltic states, because I think and it connects to the streamers, in particular the Netflixes and Amazon Primes of this world, because these new entrants to the market have a different business model to the traditional studios, because they particularly Netflix, but in general they're looking to generate subscribers. They want a direct relationship with consumers in all the countries of the world. And in order to do that, they're interested in not just using Latvia as a location, but they want to make local content of local stories in local languages, or in English in the case of these countries, that will appeal to local consumers, which become local subscribers. So that's a major opportunity, I think, to all countries of the world that have any kind of film industry, and this is new. I used to be a producer in a previous life, and as an independent producer, making content that we own the IP. So that's a model that works here. There's also the service producer model, which is more about providing a service. And though if you wanted to be a producer, those were the 2 models to think of. Now there's something different. There's what we call the hybrid, which is to say a local story, as I've described, made locally with local talent based on local heritage, but made at a budget level that's very much more similar to what the service producers are used to. So this area of activity, I think, is a new opportunity.
So this is good news.
This is very, very good news. So here's you're, as an independent producer in a country like Latvia or these countries, or even back in the UK, as an independent producer has skills in finding and creating content with local stories and local talent and local crew. That is now in demand in a way that was never the case before. So I'm still going to answer your question, but if I want to come to the third thing. So we've got consumer demand exploding globally. We've got these new Hollywood-based over the OTT streaming services that want new product. But the other thing that's happened is governments around the world have started to understand that the film sector represents not just cultural value, to the countries concerned, and that's the cultural agenda has been the agenda from the beginning for government policy. But in recent years, and clearly here in Latvia, the economic and industrial aspect of these activities have become very, very highly valued. And you could probably look in most countries that have experienced difficulties since the financial crisis of 2008, austerity, government policies that are, reducing investment in lots of areas. In most of those countries, you'll find that investment in our industry, through incentives mostly, has boomed. And that's because these are industries that don't suffer so much during economically difficult times, and where they do have this movement of the consumer and the streaming services going on. So, coming back to your question, incentives. Incentives have been a primary driver of successful activity around the world, and indeed here and in neighboring countries. They've become, we produce every 6 months an index, an analysis of the world's automatic incentives, and there's now nearly 100 countries or regions in the world that provide automatic incentives available for local and international producers. It's a pretty easy system to operate. It's not subsidy, it's investment. You can identify the returns that come back, and we do that all the time. So, a country wanting to grab more of this business and incentives, yes, is usually the first thing. Then you have to look at, well, what would the result of an incentive be? It's going to be more production activity, and that brings with it other challenges, opportunities, and problems, particularly for the larger productions. In many countries that have been successful through incentives in attracting productions and building local production, are running out of capacity. And this is a very, very serious problem. And if we think
we're actually experiencing it as we speak. I know that, when we are collaborating between the countries, working with the workforce in the Baltics and maybe in a larger region, but we are exactly experiencing that as producers.
And I think that we can think about capacity in two ways. There's sort of physical assets, capacity, studios mostly, other providers, other vendors, renting equipment, providing post-production, whatever it may be. Sort of, let's call it, physical assets in one place. And certainly, sound stages is a big gap, and there's a big lack everywhere around the world. But governments are starting to get involved, particularly municipalities, in realizing, yes, some sort of public money with private investment to create a new studios.
So this is happening around the world?
Around the world. We're involved at the moment in 4 different studies into creating new studios from New Zealand, Abu Dhabi, Croatia, UK, and there's lots and lots of others going on.
So, and it's not like only a private or say like, I know that in Canada, in Toronto, they're building, like a Netflix is building.
Yeah.
So, but there is also another model that the government and municipalities is participating.
Yes, there's, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, there would not be this interest. We would not be doing 4 studies at one time. What's happened is municipalities have also, particularly municipalities, realized the potential of this industry, as I've described. And one way of them to grab a permanent share of it is to co-venture with private investors in creating a facility. And these days, we're not just talking about stages or TV studios. We're talking about a hub or a cluster of activity that surrounds this. So there could be a vocational training or film school in there. There could be a sort of a creative cluster with other creative industries, a vendor village, a tourist attraction, whatever it might be. Yeah. And the third and the most difficult of all is workforce, is crew, particularly below the line. If we thought the world is short of sound stages, it's even more short of crew. And the trouble is, it takes longer to build a crew base than it does to create an incentive or even build a studio. So any country that we're talking to that's thinking of an incentive, we say at the same time, start planning to build your crew base.
And talking about the crew, this is very important point. Is there any models that you see, like different models? Because as you said, it takes like for somebody to go to the film school, it would take like 4 or 5 years or maybe less, but still, I mean, we need these people right now.
Yeah, that's exactly. We're seeing and recommending a different approach to the typical film academy or sort of education, higher education version, which is kind of, let's call it an instant impact, hothouse, fast track process in the below the line skills area. By and large, this means looking for skills. We could say electricians, for example, or costume designers, looking for where these skills currently exist in other industries and finding ways to transfer those people into our industry. Yeah, but it shouldn't be that hard, because this is a growing industry that's paying good wages and salaries, that's also skills that are mobile, so it can work anywhere.
Exactly.
So, you know, I'm sorry for the fashion industry and the electricians out there that fix our problems at home, but this is where they should be working. So there are emerging some interesting vocational transference skills development models, which don't take 4 years, which take 6 weeks. Part of the challenge is those individuals working in these other areas don't really understand what the potential of our industry is. As an industry, we're rather opaque. We're not very clear in describing how it works on any number of levels. So in some countries, you know, I've known where young people wanting to work in our industry, when they say to their parents, yeah, I really want to train to be a gaffer or whatever it may be in the film industry, their parents say, well, you know, that's not a real activity. That's some sort of, you know, lifestyle thing, and you're never going to get paid very much. And,
so it's changing. You
should be an accountant, a lawyer, or a doctor. But no, nowadays, a gaffer, an accountant, a lawyer, and a doctor is what you should be thinking of.
That sounds very, very good. And talking about other ways of cooperating, I know for sure that you have been involved in this project, North Star Film Alliance, that is also actually addressing these things of cooperation and of somehow getting together to do, you know, kind of reacting to this big demand, but in a different way. Because as we heard the previous speaker said, Dita said that we were the first ones in Latvia that we invented in this region the rebate, the cash rebate. But then there are other countries are following, so there's a growing competition. Like one is saying 20, the other is at 25, 35, 45, 50. So there is this project, North Star Film Alliance, that addresses this in another way. So we kind of thought, well, why compete? Let's cooperate.
Absolutely.
So and you were actually doing for this project the survey of 3 countries involved, which are Finland, Estonia, and Latvia.
Yep.
Maybe you could tell a little bit, like how, from that perspective, because you had to, you talked to many producers in these countries and kind of got more closer look. Yes, where we stand in comparison to other regions where you're working.
Okay, so we were hired to help to work with North Star Film Alliance, these 3 countries, to develop the concept of one marketing effort, one collaborative effort, to mostly focused on attracting international portable productions to these 3 countries and encouraging the producers from outside to think of these 3 countries as one sort of homogeneous film ecology rather than 3 separate countries. And it's a perfect example of what we call co-opetition, which is a combination of competition and cooperation.
That's
and actually, and I think it's pretty unique. So I commend the people involved with this idea, because it's a way of sort of codifying and making a reality of what's starting to happen anyway on the ground. So as I understand it, and through what you've told me and our work and talking to people here, you know, if you're making a piece of scripted content in one of these 3 countries, it's quite likely you're going to be using the resources of some of these other countries anyway, particularly crew. But there may be, you know, a combination of a studio in one country, locations in another, or whatever it may be. So there was already this sense of we're working together anyway.
Exactly, because we're also like talking about size, because
yes.
sometimes like for per se American industry, we're so small as being like alone, like only Latvia. But as a region, we already can kind of.
I think it may be that I think we found that the countries in this region were not necessarily thought of from Hollywood. You know, the people involved in making the production decisions on these portable productions, they didn't necessarily think, oh, let's go to Latvia or let's go to Lithuania, to Finland or Estonia. They kind of realized that this is an area where there's activity and resources and assets and potential. Now, trying to find a way to harmonize the offers in each country is obviously not going to be easy.
Well, yeah, not really maybe harmonizing, but at least getting to know each other better, and being able to say to a foreign producer maybe a little bit more than, you know, like I will hire a gaffer from Finland or
yes, because
art director.
Yeah, because these producers are looking at. So I was just in Croatia right now, so they're making lots of stuff in Croatia, but they're also using, because Croatia doesn't have a studio, they're using studios in Belgrade, in Serbia. They're using skilled workers from Slovenia next door, or Bosnia, or whatever it might be. So they're used to doing this, but at the moment, they have to put the collaboration together themselves. So in North Star Film Alliance, what you're doing is you're offering to them, hey, here's a one-stop shop that you can start with, and we can help you find a way to get the best out of these 3 countries. Yeah. It's a very smart idea.
Thank you for that. Yes, actually, was wondering how long time we still have.
You've got the clock over there.
Isn't that time for maybe questions from the audience? Because I feel that to Jonathan mainly, because I think.
Yes, yeah, there's a question, and wow, microphone now is going to you. Yeah.
Thank you for your discussion, and my question is how Latvia can participate in this $1 billion script contest in Hollywood.
The script content, well, I can talk a little bit about how Latvia can compete. And in fact, we've got a panel after the break which will go into this in more detail. I think the first question is, I'd turn it around a little bit. And I'd say, well, from whose perspective are you looking for the advantages of competing? And I think really it's both an industrial perspective or a business perspective and a cultural and government perspective. So, you know, to answer this question, if I was going to find out the answer, I'd like to sit down with representatives from the industry, particularly the production industry, and with Andres and others from government, to try and, let's say, well, before we start to initiate, you know, strategies to grab this business, what's the end game? What are we trying to get out of it? And also, frankly, how do we measure whether it's working or not? So, you know, if we're talking about Latvia just wanting to increase the volume, the sheer volume of activity, then I think you've already got in place your incentive structures. I don't know enough about it, but we've noticed around the world all incentive structures are being modernized and adapted as time goes by. So one thing is to make sure that the incentive works and is totally fit for purpose. I've no reason to think that it isn't. But then I think we've talked about infrastructure, we've talked about crew, got to make sure that that's available for this activity. But the other part of it, which I know we're going to talk about later, is for Latvia or any country like this, is not to abandon or ignore the important national, domestic, majority and minority co-production activities. And there is a danger in some countries, like my own, that all this enthusiasm for the inward investment, there's a danger if the local, the domestic production sector is kind of ignored, there's a danger that a lot of bad things will happen. First of all, the international productions use crew and talent that learn from and work, first of all, in the domestic market. There's been a recent survey in the UK that in the activity of servicing inward productions, 73% of the workers on those productions that were analysed started in domestic production. So it's a nursery slopes for this other area, but also it's incredibly important for any nation like Latvia to ensure that the cultural value of its creative film industry is protected and expanded, because we cannot ignore the reason why most countries started to support with public money our sector is for cultural benefits, to have the voices from the country seen, to have audiences, have access to content that isn't necessarily always going to be provided by the market. I mean, Dieter is a prime example of someone who knows all about this and is working on it.
But I think it's also this synergy that comes out of this, because I think that both those sides really benefit each other, because we so much benefit, like the local production. What I see is benefiting the way that I can go as a local producer having less money, but I can still go to those companies involved that I know that are making money on servicing. So they are more open to do something, for maybe less, or as more friendly for, basically you have a more friendly environment for happy people, who are willing to help to do it. It's just that recognizing that yes, we need our own films, and this is absolutely, I completely agree.
Well, the other thing about crew or film workers used to working on national films, when they move into working on bigger projects. On national films, there's usually a high degree of multitasking. So as a crew member, you're used to sort of doing a lot of different things, and so you understand the collective effort of everybody. When you move into major productions, when you're in one department, working only in that department, but you still understand the needs of your fellow workers in a close-by department, that's something that Hollywood is not used to seeing and that values enormously. So there's these sort of slightly subtle benefits of this, this synergy, if you like.
Yeah, no, I have been noticing it for working for years in this industry and serving many different countries, like Asian or European and American, and they always like the reason they actually come back for more, and they're always pointing out that you guys have wonderful people here, wonderful crews. Of course, nature and everything, and so. But the main asset is definitely our crews and our people and their attitude towards work. And this comes from what you're saying, from this their own work.
I would just say that that's all true, but if Latvia doesn't continue to build its workforce, all these wonderful people will be working in Lithuania or Czech Republic or UK or somewhere else. Right.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a challenge, but it's a good challenge because there is the thing is happening, everything is happening.
Definitely.
So we just need to make right decisions, right turns, and work together.
Yeah.
I think both in the region, like we talked about North Star Film Alliance, and also not to divide really like this is art and we're not talking to industry, and vice versa. So that's what you're talking about, that there must be those points where we benefit from each of these things. Maybe another question. We still have like 3 minutes.
Already 2 minutes. So
No.
time is running out. One by one, not all together. We cannot just.
I tell you what,
yeah.
I'm going to ask myself a question.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Because well, actually, somebody asked me this a couple of days ago when I was talking about this sort of explosion of demand. They said, "Well, is this a bubble? You know, a bubble like the .com bubble in the 90s?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Is this forever, or is it all going to go like that and then like that?" And it's definitely not a bubble. In my view, this production boom will continue to grow. It may well slightly sort of slow down as the streaming services sort of accumulate all the sources of production that they need. And maybe in the future there'll be some consolidation among those companies, but we're on a path. It's a fast growth, incredibly fast growth path. Now in the last few years, it will continue for a few more years. It'll slow down, but bubble it is not. I haven't quite got the word for what it is, but.
So you would encourage young people to choose professions in film.
Definitely, yeah, as you would, as I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. At this moment, please applause to our speakers.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yes.